What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to a going over edition of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, joined as always by Callum Wiggins.
Hello.
And Rob DeFelice.
Hey.
And if you don't know what going over is, because it's been a little while since we've done it, it's our sort of catch-all term for we just talk. It's not quite the dark cast side of things where you might go completely random. We do have a topic in mind, but it's more of a general discussion. You know, on the Fanboys Anonymous side of things, this would have been like a group meeting classification, where instead of doing a gimmick, you know, we're not doing like superstar scores, we're not watching something for a fan announce table or doing fantasy booking or anything like that. We're just basically talking about something in an overall general sense. And we were trying to debate. We got a couple different ideas. Full transparency, I ended up just kind of being like, I don't really feel like being that and that and that and that. We were thinking about potentially watching the first Evolution, but that's like 3.5 hours long, and that felt like quite a bit of commitment. We were thinking about maybe touching up on the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling and going back, since it's been a bunch of years, like 5 years or something since we had done that. Maybe longer, actually. And then I was like, we just did the Mount Rushmore thing. We just did like 5 Mount Rushmores in a row, basically, with those heel and face turn thing, or heel and face Mount Rushmores, and naturally just heel and face turn in my brain. We thought about maybe doing some kind of fantasy booking thing. I was actually working a little bit on that last night, trying to figure out like an ultimate card, and then like maybe an ultimate card with other things like TNA's roster and all. Just couldn't get into it and all. So I figured, you know what? If we're going to be talking about the whole Evolution 2 pay-per-view coming up, and some of this topic, of course, could be on that event itself, and we're going to get into our predictions and everything when it comes to that. But the general idea of doing Evolution again, why now? And maybe in some ways, why not sooner? And then in other ways, why at all? And then differences that have happened over the past bunch of years since that's happened, you know, pros and cons, there's good and bad. That's been, you know, a progression of women's wrestling. So yeah, there's a lot to actually dive into and lots of different random discussions. And we don't have any kind of an itinerary of what we planned on discussing. We're just sort of going to go on the fly. So we invite you to go on the fly as well, and to leave your comments below. Tell us what you think about all these topics, and ideally, if you have the option to be able to do it, maybe like timestamp something, so that way I know that you're like, I'm referring to this, instead of just doing the Michael P.S. Hayes thing of that was wrong, and you're like, well, what part? Keep in mind too, though, lots of different ways for you to leave those comments. If you are on YouTube, of course, ring that notification bell, hit those email alerts, get the like button all sorted out, click on the share button as well, subscribe, click on the join button that you have as same things as the Patreon. Patreon.com/SmarkOutMoment has the Darkcast tier, Pick Your Poison tier, and so on and so forth, just the same as YouTube's channel membership. Redbubble and TeePublic is also where you can pick up your merchandise to help us out. Discord is another great avenue for you to chat it up and either leave comments and do things about this podcast, or just random memes or during shows or anything along those lines. So hop on over there and join the discussion. And let's just kind of get this party started. Again, I don't really have like a list of topics that we should go into, but I guess the first thing I'm going to pitch to you guys, do you think that they should have had another Evolution in the past decade, or do you think that it's better to do at once every couple of years, make it a little bit more special?
I think that Evolution probably should have been an added on annual event, because one, the desire for it was there. I know that I saw articles and wrote articles about Evolution 2. Stephanie McMahon says it's coming, or, Bailey wants an Evolution 2 or whatever. And I think the desire was there for it. It could have been a nice spotlight every year for the women. It almost feels way more out of place now than it would have had it kept being your average yearly pay-per-view, because at the time they were doing you know, Hell in a Cell, TLC, Extreme Rules, and you could have just said, yeah, this is another one of those themed shows that they do every month. Now it feels like this isn't your strongest women's division. There's a lot of talent, but it's not what it was over the years. And I just sort of feel like they're just doing it to do it, and that feels weird and wrong to me.
I think the reason why we haven't seen Evolution for a long time is primarily just because the reason for Evolution in the first place went away, which is the women couldn't compete in Saudi Arabia originally. So you needed to throw an Evolution show together to make it seem like, on the surface, you really cared about your women's performers, when you would still take the money from Saudi Arabia that wouldn't allow the women to appear at the show at that time, and then gradually wear them down to the point of, okay, we are going to start featuring the women's wrestlers there as well. And so the reason for Evolution existing in the first place just disappeared entirely. And they did other things in like 2019 where you had like main event WrestleMania being that women's freeway. So it became less of, okay, this is like the big spotlight show for our women's thing, and now we're going to integrate women into the fold in a more, natural. They're just part of the show, and they're going to be featured acts, and they're main eventers, and all this other stuff. So there was less of a need for an Evolution show. I think the reason why Evolution's come back now is because I guess it's maybe like a trying to keep momentum going in terms of goodwill. I'm not saying that because it's like it's a recent thing. Actually, they've probably had this in the works for a while, but it's especially in the last few months, there has been like this decline in interest and general goodwill towards WWE. So a show like Evolution is a good PR move and a good kick for people to just say, hey, we're still doing great things. We're still good guys here. We're still leading the charge for women's wrestling. So it makes sense from just a PR standpoint, which is essentially what these two shows are. They're just PR stunts. Just that it's not really a thing that they've put a lot of real time or investment into doing, because otherwise they would have done it in a more frequent basis. It's just a good move to build up a little bit of like fan support and, yeah, this is great, look at what we're doing, this is so great, and move along from that point. So yeah, that's why there probably haven't been that many Evolutions, because it's a nice little, not get out of jail free card, but some sort of nice little shiny piece of PR positiveness that they can pull out every now and again.
Also, PR within the company. After a little while, the complaints, I don't want to say complaints, the justifiable upsetness, let's put it that way, of the women's roster being like, hey, you know what, you are kind of like reverting us back to not having as many matches, not having as much time. Like, we're taking a little bit of a step back. How about we stop that? The complaints have been a little bit more prevalent over the past couple of years. So now this is like a thinly veiled attempt to like hit the reset button a little bit and be like, so, now that we have this, we do want to show you that we care, and, that kind of thing. And then, I'm sure somebody somewhere is like, that'll shut them up, that kind of idea. But also, there are people within the company that are like, no, we just legitimately want to do this because we do think that it's a good idea and we want to really show our support and so on and so forth like that. And then they get a win, and that's a good thing. And I think that one of the issues that, we talk about it every year when it comes to War Games, and we've talked about it before with Hell in a Cell and TLC, if you do the same thing once a year, every year, and especially if you have it at like the same time of the year, it does eventually feel a little less special. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have the Royal Rumble every year, or, like some things are just kind of staples. Every year they're going to come back around. They're going to do an Elimination Chamber. They're going to do, Money in the Bank, whatever it might be. But I do think that if we would have gotten Evolution once a year, I think by the third year, even, people would have been complaining and they would have been like, I don't know if this is necessarily worth having a whole pay-per-view dedicated to this crew, because there wouldn't be as much of a need to bring in older talent and legends and everything, because it was just, yeah, it's the same as what it's been before. Kind of the same as like the Royal Rumble for the women's division was. Very first one of them, groundbreaking thing. Something that they were like, let's bring a lot of legends back and let's really make this like a celebration that we finally achieved this milestone. And then over the couple of years, then it's like, all right, well, now we just have the regular roster and it's just baked in as it is. I think if Evolution would have done that, it wouldn't feel that special, but I think that they could have gotten away very easily with doing it every 5 years at least. And I think that was a little bit of a mistake to kind of be like, if you have the ability to do it every year, that's good PR. And, there's elements like that. But at least with every 5 years, you could use it as a check-in, kind of. And be like, in the past couple of years, this is how the women's division has evolved. It's evolution. I hate the term. I think that it's kind of ridiculous that they went with the whole revolution equals now it's going to be evolution, and then now it's just going to be a term for that. But it's two of the you take a group and then you make it a different name, or you do vice versa. Judgment Day was a pay-per-view, now it's a group. Evolution was a group, now it's a pay-per-view. It's an even trade. But I think that
Divas Revolution, that's such a better branding. The Divas Revolution. Why did they go, well, we can't use that anymore? That was
because the revolution eventually ends. Like you go from revolution to, well, not necessarily evolution, but the revolution is a short-term thing, then just happens, and then like the French Revolution didn't last up until the end of like Napoleon Bonaparte's reign. It happened like over a few months or a year period, and then you have a new regime in place. So you can't have a revolution go for long.
But isn't that's literally the better way to describe what happened in WWE 10 years ago? Because
the term still exists. They still refer to that as like the Divas Revolution, but they call the pay-per-view Evolution instead, because it's a case of like, I guess in their mind they see it as like a growth, and they think like Revolution is maybe a bit too, okay, they've done that now, so they can't keep calling the pay-per-view Revolution, because it's like, it's not like every year they have to reassert themselves. Almost, it's like they're here now and they're doing their stuff.
I still feel like a better name would have been something that, like you said, like a new regime comes in after a revolution. I think if they would have not gone with evolution, because I think they were just like, take the R off, there you go. I think they could have had some kind of branding that would have been like I would not at all suggest girl power, because that's too freaking on the nose and too cheesy, but like something that's like evokes the idea of like women's division, here is your spotlight. And I think evolution just kind of implies more the business changing rather than like spotlight for the women. You know what I mean?
I mean, actually, speaking about this now, like I've now just also clocked in like the real reason why this show is happening beyond just the PR thing. It's to take the shine off All In.
Oh yeah, that's one of them for sure.
Because it's the main reason. Like it's like we've known that All In is taking place July 12th since the middle of last year. Yeah, so they've known well in advance that this is taking place. So what can they do to try and take some of the shine and some of the, because All In's going to happen, and then it has it on Saturday. I know it's on a different day, but it has it on Saturday. But then they can take over the new cycle with Evolution on the Sunday, and that means they can kind of minimize the after effects of All In, because you almost like try and take over the new cycle with your own show after that. I mean, they're already doing it with putting an NXT show and putting a Saturday Night's Main Event on the same day as All In as well. So I think that this is just another, and the reason why they've done this is to kind of throw that off as well. So it's a convenient PR thing, and it's a convenient way to continue this ongoing gazumping of AEW events.
Great.
I mean, it's really, it's sad how much effort they're putting into that for this weekend coming up. They're just like, well, we need NXT and we need the women's show and we need Saturday night's main event and we need to make it, put Goldberg in there. And they're just like, they're panicking for some reason, as if it's like, is it going to hurt you at all if they have a good weekend?
It's one of those things that they can kind of like justify in the sense of, if they still get if All In still gets a lot of viewership buys and all the other things. So like, it was just against a Saturday Night's Main Event and a NXT show and a women's show, and like our women's pay-per-view. It's like, it's not like we put SummerSlam head to head with it and people still tuning in for All In more than SummerSlam. It's like we threw out some of the ones that we were kind of willing to sacrifice viewers on just to try and hurt them a little bit. That's the strategy.
Look,
It's clear as day.
I'll say the same thing, and I have said the same thing in the past for all of the GCW collective events that bombard Mania weekend. I don't give a fuck if you're WWE. If you're throwing NXT, a blase Saturday Night's Main Event, and Evolution, none of that shit's gonna equal All In. You're almost hurting all three events by doing this. Because none of that's going to take any of the shine away from what happens in Texas. And they can give it their best shot. Evolution might, have its own shine to it, but it's not going to take any of the shine away. But, good luck to them for trying.
And for the record, for this upcoming weekend and all that, I think that it's at least smarter on their end, and they kind of couldn't do it any other way, really. But it's at least smarter on their end that Evolution is coming after All In, because if you want to try to get the cycle to be like, all right, but that was yesterday, now you talk about this. But they couldn't, because Saturday night's main event can't be on Sunday. You know what I mean? So I don't think that was something that like they planned. I think that they fell ass backwards into that potential positive. But yeah, I mean that is a big talking point. Is they did this originally with the Saudi show, and now they waited all this time and they felt the need to do it now for All In and for like around this time frame, because they could have done this any other time. If they want to do Evolution, they could have had this last weekend. They could have done it in September. There's nothing at all that says, well, it's got to be the weekend of All In. Or, it's not something that's like Great American Bash realistically should be in July. The whole thing's based around the 4th of July. Evolution isn't. So they chose that this was the time that they wanted to do this. And I think that a good portion of it is because they wanted that little PR, pivot.
I mean, the original one took place in September, so it's not like, they're locked into any kind of month. I mean, to get more towards the actual gist of, the discussion of the division, I said it already, I don't feel like this is WWE's strongest women's division right now. And I don't say that to say, it sucks. It's just there was a time in 2018, 2019 where you felt like, okay, a good portion of these women can just about, headline any major TV show and you'll be okay with it. In fact, a lot of them did. Even the Riot Squad was main evented the Chamber that one year. It's this division feels like one that needs a lot of work. You know what I mean? Like not everybody's as polished as the women who competed at this event in 2018 were.
I tend to disagree. I think talent-wise, they're not light years ahead, but they're significantly beyond what they were in 2018. Because 2018 was very much underpinned by the Four Horsewomen and Ronda Rousey. And that was basically it, realistically. Like, you had, like, Alexa Bliss was, like, had shot up a bit, but she was going on her downswing of being injured every few months. You had Nia Jax, but everyone knew the deficiencies there in terms of her in-ring work. And then you had NXT, which was bringing people through like your Shayna Baszler's, Kairi Sane's, Io Shirai at this point.
Yeah,
Tony
Io and
Storm's coming
Tony
in.
Storm for the Mae Young Classic, which
Yeah.
is like they're not being treated like the people that they are now.
Exactly. Whereas going into Evolution 2025, I think that in terms of pure talent and pure ability, I think it far supersedes what you had on the show in 2018, which had to be carried by the likes of bring Nikki Bella back, which they're doing this time as well. But but like Nikki Bella to main event the show, having to rely on like just throw Sasha Banks and Bailey in a random 6-woman tag match, like fill a battle royal with a load of random people, which they're also going to do this year as well. But like again, like things a bit too the same. But have like in that one, like Rhea Ripley was in a dark match for the NXT UK Women's Championship, whereas this time she's one of the biggest things in all of professional wrestling and is going to be in the likely in the main event of Evolution. So I think that because this time you've got, instead of just having kind of your main stars being 5 women, 4 horsewomen and Ronda Rousey, now you have Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, Io Sky, you still have Charlotte, Becky, Bailey there. Have Tiffany Stratton, who's been pushed super highly. Like, you do have, I think, a more well-rounded roster. I just don't think that the issue is, it's actually probably pretty similar to what it was in 2018, which is that they haven't positioned enough people well enough to advance beyond the kind of established main event. So nowadays we have this established main event scene for the women, which is like realistically everything revolves around, at the moment on Raw, everything revolves around Rhea Ripley, and on SmackDown, when she's available, everything revolves around Bianca Belair. When they're not available, then Tiffany Stratton will come slot in for Bianca Belair, and Io Sky will hold the world title to produce some good matches for Raw. But realistically, when everybody's healthy and everything's going, then you're just building things around Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair and just letting things happen in the meantime. So whereas back then, you were just, again, very realistically, you were, by the time Evolution was going around, you were building things around Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey for them to eventually fight at WrestleMania. Becky Lynch was just a interloper that managed to get into the main event match, but realistically, you were just building towards Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey against each other, and all the other parts are just kind of interchangeable ones that might occasionally get a bit more over and get featured a little bit more. But yeah, it's a very how do you say that? There's, oddly enough, there is a glass ceiling to the women's division in WWE, which is difficult for many people to break through.
See, the more you just talked, the more I feel like I want to change what I said, because maybe it's not less than, maybe it's exactly where it was, and the puzzle pieces are just different, because back then it was all, Horsewoman Rousey. Now I would make the argument it's completely just, okay, what's Rhea doing? Okay, well, like you said, Bianca's not there, so we'll slot in Tiff. And then, okay, how can we, spotlight the returning legends like a Trish or a Nikki Bella? And like that's fine. That is just how wrestling works sometimes. I just feel like they have slipped with how they've booked these women, and it has, to Tony's earlier point, kind of gotten back to the point of, all right, they no longer see these things as important, because yes, you do have more championships, which should theoretically equal more representation and more time on the card, but it actually just equals, haha, just kidding, neither belt gets defended at WrestleMania, and we're just gonna kind of twiddle our thumbs around these titles for a while. Hope you're happy that you have them. And I think we could be way further along in the progression of the division than we are. I think someone like a Charlotte Flair, and I've said this a few times on the podcast recently, shouldn't be saying, yeah, I don't think the women will ever headline WrestleMania again. You know? Like, I think that's a crazy thing to say when arguably there's more room for them to do so, and it's just the focus has moved so far beyond the women's division. Io hasn't defended the fucking title since WrestleMania, I feel like.
Yeah.
She hasn't. You just, I'm just feeling like that. She hasn't defended the title since
Yeah.
WrestleMania. So.
No, Tiffany has been champion for 6 months, 7 months maybe, and has just fought Nia Jackson, Charlotte Flair.
Mm.
And speaking of Charlotte Flair, there are some people who should just come back and be dominant. Like, Flair is in the middle of this storyline with Bliss, and I don't feel like that's a way to spotlight somebody who, if you have them week to week, and they are as big of a name as they are, maybe they should be used in a bit higher of a role on the card. And I understand why they're doing it. Like, I know people got tired of seeing Charlotte in the main event, but it's like, that is kind of one of the name value characters you have right now. Maybe let's get some use out of that. You know?
I know that you were a champion, especially this year, and last year as well, about the idea of putting more non-title women's matches on the WrestleMania card, and just being like, well, when it comes to trying to equalize the division a little bit, it's very easy to get Seth Rollins versus Randy Orton on a WrestleMania card. Two big names. We like those guys. They go there. They have a grudge match. It's really hard to get somebody like a Charlotte Flair, even as big as she is in the division, to be in a singles match or a tag team match or whatever it might be at WrestleMania, and for it to not be for the championship. Because even at that point, it's like they treat it as basically, we need the 2 world titles, and then we need some kind of multi-women match, whether it's like, the tag team showcase or blah, 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 or, the women's battle royal or a fatal 4-way for the championship, something like that. And once you check off a few of those names, as much as I think that they overall, the talent from the last time and from this time are kind of equal in some ways. Like, we've got a lot of really good talent now that wasn't there, like Jordynne Grace, and people like Rhea have stepped up and all, but there still are just basically around 10 names that really matter in the women's division. And once you get through, did we check off Rhea's on the card? Did we check off Bianca's on the card? Did we check off that Io has something to do? And even then, not necessarily all the time. Becky, Flair, etc., etc. Then you are at a point where they're like, and that's good enough, and the rest of them just fill in the blanks. And somebody like a Roxanne Perez, who's like working her way up the roster now, is not going to be as much of a priority, but she, by all accounts, is one of their better talents and one of their more interesting people that they're building and everything. I think that they're in a position where they still just don't want to give up that spotlight from the men's division, just because the men's division tends to draw a little bit better in some scenarios. And when it doesn't draw as better, I think that they're still stuck in an antiquated mindset. Well, it's like, well, that's the exception. Because I think you had said it earlier, Callum, Rhea is like far above and beyond more popular than most of the men on the roster. And I don't even think that that's up for a debate. And she's not even as popular now as she was 2 years ago when she was like really the hot ticket item. But she's still like, some people are watching Raw more for Rhea than anything else. And some people are way more interested in what Bianca has to do than literally any, Intercontinental Champion, mid-card title feud for the men, World Championship in some cases. I know there's plenty of people that would argue if they had to pick between Gunther and Bianca, they would be like, oh, no question, I'm picking Bianca on my roster. And then there's a lot of people that are looking at that and going, oh, well, that can't possibly be true. And, you know, I mean, you can't lift that veil for other people, you know?
Sexism exists. Like there's no getting around that. And there's also, you know, the other end of that where there are people out there who do just watch the women. You know, they do. Like, there are people out there who are just like, I'd rather watch Maxine Dupree than watch Seth Rollins. And this event is for them more than anything, because I think those are the people who will be like, yeah, this could be the best thing that happens this weekend, even with AEW.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, I mean, the card's not filled yet, but they've got 5 matches that they've announced, and they've kind of alluded to at least one more, if not, you know, 2, 3, whatever it might be. We still need to figure out who's in the Fatal 4-Way for the tag titles, you know, who's in the Battle Royal, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm looking at this card and I'm like, you know, this actually might be, if not my favorite card of the weekend, my number 2. Underneath All In, most likely. But, like, you know, you tell me, hey, do you want to watch Saturday night's main event or this? Fuck yeah, I would rather watch Evolution. You know? Okay, so it's Drew McIntyre. That's a spoiler for SmackDown. It's Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton. All right, well, you know, I've seen it before. There's nothing really special about that. They're great. They're 2 of the best people that they have on their roster. But I don't really care. LA Knight versus Seth Rollins. Yeah, same exact thing. Love LA Knight. Love Seth Rollins. Great. Don't really care. Goldberg? Interesting. It's going to suck. Gunther? Great. He's not going to be able to carry Goldberg. Rhea and Io? Yeah, I've seen it. But you know what? That match is going to be better than any of those 3 matches from Saturday night's main event. Tiffany versus Trish? I think that's going to be better than Gunther Goldberg. Battle Royal? Hell yeah. I'll take a Battle Royal over Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton. Like, you know? Not that Battle Royals tend to be, you know, the most amazing matches, but like there's a fun element to it, that, and it's for a championship match, and you know, I like the way that they're setting up some of this card, but that's without even so. There's Bianca's not on this card yet, you know. It's kind of crazy.
She might just not be on the card.
She might just be with the broken finger, not able to do anything, or they might put her in the Battle Royal and just be like, look, you can't really do much, but you can hide it there, or you know, whatever. But that's actually another talking point worth bringing up. And this is something that we would have gotten a little bit deeper into if this would have been like the only pay-per-view for the whole weekend, but we got to kind of consolidate a little bit of our discussion for the predictions, and that's why we're part of the reason why we're doing this discussion as like a little separate bonus one. The amount of people that are on this card versus the amount of people that were on the last card. The last card had 8 matches if you count the dark match, and a Battle Royal was one of them. So they're doing the Battle Royal again. They're, you know, going to get a lot of people on there. Last Battle Royal was 20 women, but they had a smaller roster. They didn't put everybody that was in NXT and NXT UK on there, and I don't expect them to do that again this year. I do expect them to throw in maybe at least 1 or 2 people from Evolve, maybe somebody from LFG. Like if I were, you know, in charge, I'd be like, hey, why don't we give a little bit of a spotlight to like Bailey Humphrey from LFG? Put her in the Battle Royal. It worked for some other people in the past. You know, Babatunde was in the Greatest Royal Rumble. That was like, let's get our first look at that guy. He's big. Not as many other people are. And, you know, they have more people to work with now than they had the last time around. So people are going to be left off the card. But it's funny to see how many of the people are still there in the same or similar positions. You know, Nia winning the Battle Royal last year. Nia's a prominent name right now. You still got people like, you know, Asuka is still going to be on the card in some fashion, I'm assuming. But she was in the Battle Royal. Maybe they're going to put her in the tag match or something. Zelina still there. And then you look at the people that aren't on there anymore. there's actually still quite a bit of people that were on that first card that aren't on this show, and they're not even in the company. Peyton Royce, Billy Kay, Molly Holly, Kelly Kelly. I mean, we don't know about the legends, but Tori Wilson, Sonia, Alundra Blaze, Maria Kanellis, Lana, Mandy Rose, Dana Brooke, Michelle McCool, Carmella, Ivory, Tamina, Ember Moon, Ronda Rousey, Sasha Banks, Ruby Riott, Sarah Logan, Toni Storm, Mickie James, Alicia Fox. We haven't had Lita confirmed yet. Dakota Kai's not in the company. Over 75% of the people that are on that card aren't in the company anymore, and they filled them in with people that are just as good, if not better. That's a little bit of an evolution on its own, right?
I would say so.
I mean, you'd hope so after 7 years.
Yeah.
That things have gotten slightly better.
Especially when you half the names you named weren't actually on the roster even then, because they kind of like the first Women's Rumble where you're just getting by on nostalgia and isn't this cool. Now you're trying to make a statement of this women's division now is better than the other companies, or even just, better than it was 8 years ago.
I think it's like general. If we talk about like the state of women's wrestling compared to the state it was back in 2018, I think the major difference, outside of just the talent being overall better now, just from a grand scheme of things, just as you would hope for after 7 years of progression and evolution in ring ability. I think the main difference is that in 2018 we were right at the kind of back end of the women's wrestling is new. Like, obviously it wasn't new, but the idea of we're doing all of these kind of firsts for women's wrestling. We're having them. It's the first time they've main evented a pay-per-view. It's the first time they've main event been in a Hell in a Cell or a Money in the Bank match or a Royal Rumble. And then the back end of that kind of all culminated with first ever WrestleMania main event in 2019. That was kind of like the final kind of big first they could do for women's wrestling. And then once you get through all of those big first time ever
milestone type things.
Yeah, milestone things for women, like their first ever full pay-per-view Evolution. Once you do that, it's very easy to start when you can't find that high anymore. You can't chase that high. We can do this for the first time ever. What can we do that's different and unique with them? Then you just have to book them competently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's boring for a lot of people. That is just inherently dull. So once you lose the luster of all of those exciting new developments, you then just, you should just book them as you would book the men's division. But WWE had not so much an issue with it, because I don't think that necessarily they did do too badly from that perspective. The best example of that is the positioning of the Golden Role Models, which was an act that pretty much carried them through the pandemic as best they possibly could. Basically 2020 was carried by Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Drew McIntyre. That's pretty much the three people that did the best they possibly could to try and drag them through this horrible period. And then, but beyond that point, there's no reason in 2025 why, as you mentioned earlier, why there shouldn't be more women's feuds which aren't built around titles but are built around just grudges or rivalries or anything along those lines. There's zero reason for it, because you have people that are prominently positioned. I know there's always the rationale that you have to put someone like a Rhea Ripley in a title match, or Charlotte Flair or whoever in a title match, but realistically you don't have to at this point. Rhea can just be Rhea could have had a singles match with Liv Morgan at WrestleMania with both of them out of the title picture, and it would have made sense as a WrestleMania match. I think that's the kind of the next, I'll say hurdle, but the big thing that needs to be settled in is that we need to have more women's feuds centered away from championships. I guess part of that isn't, well, they introduced the mid-card title to try and fill that void. Big issue with the booking of that one. is just the fact that they've just had the same people competing for those titles over and over and over again. But you could say the same thing about that's the same thing they've done with the women's titles as well. So maybe it's not, and I don't think this is exclusive to the women. It's not going to be. I'm not going to go on my rant of like, oh, Triple H is a bad booker or a slow booker or a boring booker. But it is just a case of like they just seem to cycle the same people in and out of these matches. So it just needs a bit more diversity because the talent is there. Realistically, you probably could call up a good third of the women's division in NXT to the main roster and they'd slot in straight away.
Oh yeah,
there's enough talent there. The issue then, if you do that, then NXT starts to flounder because you've taken the best talent from it. But the rosters in the kind of the rosters both on Raw and SmackDown are too thin to the point where you it does feel like you're seeing the same matches over and over and over again for over a short period of time. Like how many times have we had to see like Rhea Ripley get involved with one of either Liv Morgan or Raquel Rodriguez or a combination of both?
right.
It's like you want to move on from that and to do something else. But they
and then
just
immediately turn her attention back to Io.
Yeah.
Like Io was just waiting around for Rhea to be ready to fight her.
Yeah. You just cycle through all of that stuff and it doesn't feel fresh. The only time it does feel fresh is if, like, say, an Asuka comes back after a long-term injury. That's the only time it really freshens up, especially after you've lost people like Dakota Kai, Shayna Baszler, Tegan Nox, some of those people that, you know, were never going to be pushed towards main event levels at this point, but at least could offer a bit more variety. You've obviously replaced them with the likes of Stephanie Vicaire and Julia that can come in and hopefully have flourishing careers if they're allowed to progress beyond a certain level. But there's plenty of people within NXT that could do it, but then NXT becomes a lot weaker and NXT has its own brand, its own TV to protect as well. So it's just the issue that WWE is facing. And this, again, it's not a issue that's exclusive to the women. This affects the men's division as well quite significantly. But its the issue is that there's just not as many women, and there is an inbuilt bias towards featuring the men's acts more because wrestling has historically always been a male-dominated industry. And I would probably stand to say that there's probably not a great deal of prominent female voices in the upper echelons of WWE's creative.
Well, I don't believe that.
Well, you don't believe there isn't like a prominent like female voice outside of Stephanie McMahon. And
well, we know for a
she was
fact
out of that for a while.
Stephanie's not even really in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like that's the issue. Is like it's not even a case of like it doesn't need to be like a prominent like it would be good if it was like an actual like female voice that could crowd this sort of stuff. But you've had people like Fit Finlay in the past that have always been champions of the.
I mean, like, yeah, everybody
division.
knows TJ Wilson's a champion for the women.
Yeah.
But I do think it's time to get other voices as well, because just to harp on the idea of not booking people outside of championship matches, you're going to tell me that you can't find a high-level opponent for Charlotte Flair? Why is she doing this thing with Bliss? And listen, they might be besties outside the ring. They might really be passionate about this story, but it's because of WWE's booking that the fact that they're now going for the women's tag titles, it feels like a downgrade for them. And, you know, that's not me shitting on the women's tag division. That's me saying they have shit on the women's tag division to the point where the audience no longer thinks otherwise. It feels like a downgrade that Flair is just, you know, oh, okay, I'll team with Lexi. Okay, why? You're Charlotte Flair. You can't find... Go fight, go fight Julia. Go fight Stephanie Vicaire. Go fight Jordan Grace. You know?
Well, maybe right.
What did you say?
Maybe it is a downgrade because, like, again, and this is an issue that plagues everything in professional wrestling: is you don't upcycle new talent. Like, maybe it is time for Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair to drop down the order to be in tag teams, to maybe feature in like like maybe hold the Intercontinental US titles every now and again, but very rarely, if ever, feature in prominent main event matches, other than to put younger talent over. Like, I say, we can't have Chris Jericho hanging around the top order of AEW for his entire career. We can't have John Cena sticking around for like 2 or 3 years as like world champion. I know he's retiring, but you shouldn't have Randy Orton be in the main events of tons of shows moving forward at this point. It's like you need to cycle in fresh, younger talent. Right
I
now,
100% agree with that.
Yeah, so maybe it is time for Alexa and Charlotte Flair, especially considering their spotty injury records. Maybe it is time for them to take a backseat, and they're going to be the supporting cast to your Rheas, your Eos, your Biancas to be the top names moving forward. And then beyond that point, when you do like bring Jordan Grace, Stephanie Paquette, Julia, maybe Mayu Utani if they end up signing her, some other people like your Sol Rukas and people like that, when they need to come up, they need veterans to learn from and to have feuds with and be, and that's where you have your Alexa Bliss, your Charlotte Flair, eventually your Becky Lynch's, Bayley's. That's their spot. They're the veterans now that need to help get other people over. They're not saying they're day in the sun. I'm not saying they're never gonna win another world championship, because sometimes it might fit into the story for them to do so. But their time as the pillars of the company should, especially 7 years beyond that point, it should be well and truly over for them to be considered pillars of the company.
In the same kind of way for the men's division, like, people talk about Finn Balor and being like, when is he going to get his big main event push or something? He's been more of a tag team guy in WWE for a longer time frame than a main eventer. And like somebody like Randy Orton, another, you just brought him up. Like, Orton gets a match with Cena. He gets a semi-finals victory, but loses in the finals of the King of the Ring. Like, that kind of, you're not the guy that's being focused on, but you are in the mix.
Randy was a great example because he spent like a good proportion of like, I can't remember, 2022, 2023 in a tag team with Matt Riddle. Yeah. Like, that was his thing for a while. So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong. Yes, they should be booking the tag titles better. That's, again, it all comes down to everything would kind of would be fine if they were just being booked better.
Yeah.
There's really nothing wrong with the talent they have. Yes, I think that there are certain people that I would definitely downgrade from the way they've been positioned. I'm not going to name names because I think that's unfair and just unnecessarily rude. But yeah, there are certain people that I prefer over others from the women's side of things. In the same way that same for the men's division, same for anything in AEW or New Japan or anything like that. But I think that overall the talent is there to be doing something with. They just need to be booked more, don't say competently, but more in a more exciting and interesting way than what they're currently doing. It's just not dynamic enough right now. But I think that's a problem that's spans across a lot of WWE's booking right now.
And I think a good example of the idea of just using the talent more is basically like that little Bayley and Roxanne feud. Like, that wasn't for a championship, and they still didn't manage to do what they should have, I think, done with that. Like, they reached a point where they were like, okay, well, we're done with this. We're tired. We want to move on, and we don't want to focus on it because it's not for a championship. But that was a good means to give Roxanne a spotlight. And it didn't need to be, well, we have to put the belt on Bayley so that way we can do this Roxanne story because we need it to be for the championship because we don't want to do 2 women's feuds. And it shouldn't have to be that Bliss and Flair are doing what they're doing now because that gives them a tag title match. It should be more so they're having their story because SmackDown was 3 fucking hours for 6 months. You know what I mean? And they managed over 6 months of SmackDown being that long to not do that. And it was like, okay, well, all you are doing is Chelsea can fight B-Fab because B-Fab's partnered with Michin. And it's Chelsea and Michin for 4 months. Why can't B-Fab be in a feud with somebody else? Or why can't, you know, right now, spoiler for SmackDown, like Tiffany Stratton's going to come in. She's going to say, I've got Jade Cargill at SummerSlam. And then I've got, Trish Stratus beforehand. And that's just a side feud for this championship, for this pay-per-view, whatever. What's Jade going to do in the meantime? If they want to just have Jade against Naomi again for the sake of it or whatever, that's clearly revolving around the title picture anyway. And if they're just going to throw her on the Battle Royal, then that means that they're not confident enough to book her for either of them, Naomi or Jade. There's nothing else going on. And you'd be damn sure that would happen in the men's division. Sami Zayn's feuding with Karrion Kross right now. You can't tell me Karrion Kross is the biggest, most important star that you're booking around,
And that's my problem in a nutshell. They don't. Everybody preaches like, it's so important just to get the women on the card and to do something with them. And it's like, no, it's not. It's important to do something good with them. Just like it is with anyone else on the card. I'd rather. Why isn't Jade? Realistically, if Bianca's healthy, Jade and Bianca should have been the SmackDown representation for the tag match, just so they can say, we never technically lost our titles. But I'm assuming Bianca's not healthy. But even then, all right, it might not be a great match, but Jade and Nia could be on the card as a, showcase match.
Give them a gimmick that makes it like, something a little bit, quote unquote, like a little pizzazz to it. So it's not just, we've seen them against each other before, but like set it up where
Queen versus this year's Queen. Maybe she goads Jade into putting her title shot on the line. I hate that story, but like, it's a thing you can do.
Yeah, Queen versus Queen, and you give them a, not like a last woman standing because you just had that, but you know what I mean? Like you do some kind of Queen-ish variation of something or whatever. And that you gave Queen of the Ring for a reason. Do something with it instead of just hold up the crown for 3 seconds and go, this is great, and then throw it off to the side. Did she even put the crown on?
I don't think she even put the crown on. I know for a fact Cody didn't, but I don't think
there's
she
a picture of Cody with it on, but it's like one picture that I've seen. I think he put it on just to go, yeah, and then wiped his ass with it. The way that WWE is the Triple H is like, man, I love King and Queen of the Ring. Let's bring that back, but I love not actually doing anything with them. Can we just have the tournament not be it? But another discussion for another day. But
a show like this, first of all, you could have been building for months. Second of all, granted, she's now a women's tag team champion by, twist of fate. But you could have built this whole show around Roxy. And just being like, here's somebody who was a literal child when the first one happened. And now she's excited because she wants to wrestle Charlotte Flair, or maybe she won a battle royal and has earned the right to challenge, somebody for the championship, and it can be like Roxanne is the literal byproduct of the original Divas Revolution, Women's Evolution. Like, I'm just asking for stories here. I think the more we talk, the more it does boil down to, just book good. Like, I just want better stories for the women's division.
And here's another idea that, like, when you're just saying that just kind of crossed my mind. They can't have 20 matches on this card, obviously. It's not, 2-night WrestleMania fantasy booking thing where we just go, fuck it, why not? But, like, there is the entirety of Evolve and LFG and NXT. And look at the amount of people that are on. I know that you guys don't watch Evolve, and I don't blame you. I pay as little attention to it as I need to. But like, even the people that are on Evolve and LFG, most of them are as good at this point in their careers, this quickly, as the people that have been through NXT a lot of the other time. And I would, take a Callie Armstrong, take a Zeta Steel, or I only seen one match so far of Summer Sorrell, but there's nothing that separates a Summer Sorrell in my mind from an Adriana Rizzo in NXT. And if you did bring up Mariah May, and I got to change her on my roster page, she's not Mariah May, she's Blake Monroe. Look at that, Tony. Past Tony not doing that, right? There's nothing that separates somebody like her from being on the main roster. And why not do a little bit of a showcase thing of the other people if you want to call this Evolution? If you could find it on the card, or if you don't have it on the card but you want to do something leading up to it on the shows themselves, why is there no, like, on this week's episode of Evolution, or of Evolve, I mean, the names even Evolve, we're going to have a gauntlet match. And the gauntlet match is going to be every woman in Evolve is going to compete. And the winner gets to have some sort of match at Evolution.
Why isn't the Evolve Championship on the line at Evolution?
The Evolve Championship should be defended. You could do the Callie Armstrong versus Natalya match there and have it be like, that's Evolution in itself. Natalia's the veteran. Callie's the future. Let's see what young versus not old, but you know what I mean? And like,
but that's exactly what I mean. You should be doing stuff with this. You're gonna have a 4-hour pay-per-view with 25 ads, with probably a 2-hour pre-show. That'll be Kathy Kelly and Jackie Redmond talking about how amazing Rhea Ripley is, when the Evolve Championship match could be on that 2-hour pre-show. If you like, I'm just asking for the women to be featured. And the more I talk, the more I'm realizing that I'm not like even crapping on the division. I just want to see more of it. I want more for all of the women on the roster. I think it's ridiculous that, Michin, you've got all these belts and Michin can't find herself a decent spot on the card regularly. It really feels like the more things change, the more they stay the same, the more they add accolades, the more, the field somehow gets narrower instead of expanding and saying, wow, let's give a spot to this one and that one. It's just like you're featuring less people somehow.
I mean, there's a template for booking the women's division like strongly and making them feel like not even just the featured acts, but feel like the biggest part of the show. And it's right under their nose. They just have to watch NXT. NXT, the women are the stars of the show.
Yeah.
By a country mile. The men are nowhere in that company. Besides Obafemi and maybe like Trick Williams, if you're going like, but he's obviously doing stuff with TNA right now. But besides those two, the men are really nothing in NXT.
Yeah.
They're a load of interchangeable, pretty bland parts. Whereas the women are heavily featured as the acts. They're the draw of the entire show. They're the better wrestlers. They're the better characters. They're more prominently featured, rightly so. So that is your blueprint. You could just translate that over into the main roster a little bit more. Or I mean, in an ideal world, but if I'm just thinking with what's the one that has the most impact for me or for my business, then I'm just calling up the best of the women in NXT and just saying, okay, you're on the main roster now. We've got more opportunities for you to do stuff. I mean, maybe even cut some of the weak from the chaff. Like, realistically, there's no reason why a Jordan Grace or Sol Ruka or Zarya should be in NXT while B-Fab and Maxine Dupree are on the main roster. There's a complete disparity in talent there in terms of just in-ring ability. I'm not saying everything needs to come down to in-ring ability, but Maxine Dupree definitely has like personality and character. But if you want her to be a wrestler, she should be wrestling in NXT with other people of a similar experience level, and occasionally wrestling with more veteran people to get better. And then be a manager on the main show to utilize the charisma that she has. Same with BFAB, but they're not. You can't just plug them into matches on the main roster because no one's going to watch them because they're just not good enough to have good quality matches. There's no shame on them. They're just don't have that ability yet. Maybe they'll never get that ability. You never know. But it's a case of like, you're not going to, if you put them on a featured match on Evolution or any other show, people aren't going to be interested because they know that they can't. It's going to go for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, it's going to get really kind of bad and ropey for them. So you need to put in people that are more experienced. There's no reason. I mean, I understand the reason why they do it because they want to change things and they want to try and introduce them to their style. But there's no reason why Blake Monroe should be going through NXT at all. She should be on the main roster straight away. There's no reason a Jordan Gray should be going through NXT. She should go on the main roster immediately. They're more than good enough to just add to your women's division straight away. They just do it for NXT for some, I don't know whether it's some weird like, or whether it is the case like they need to learn the quote unquote WWE style, whether it's some weird hazing or something on those lines. But whatever reason they do it, it's like there is zero reason for them to do it. If you're just thinking from a logical business sense, they're good enough to go onto the main roster and add to depth immediately. And it's more interesting that way because they come to the main roster straight away and they're immediately okay. I know Becky Lynch, Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley. They're way more interesting than they just appear in NXT and they just feel like and they like get subsumed into the crowd of people that are already there.
I think the reason they do that with NXT is because they keep trying to have their cake and eat it too. With like, yeah, we're still NXT, we're still the cool, the indie people want to come here, the people from elsewhere want to come here, without realizing like, and I know Blake Monroe is over the moon to be in WWE right now, but realistically, you won the world title in Wembley Stadium. You probably should have just tried to kick Becky Lynch's ass and taken your chances. You probably should have just went for Charlotte Flair and taken your chances.
She's delighted to be wrestling in front of like 50 people in that like rec center that she was in for her debut match against some nobody that no one's ever like.
And I get it. I understand why, but it's also like, dude, have some like even if you want to play the fake it till you make it card, like. Yeah, it's your dream, but fuck, you're beyond NXT. You can have your dream by going to Raw. Be AJ Styles. AJ Styles said, no, fuck you, I'm not going to NXT. Like, put me in the Rumble, and I've been doing this forever. Mariah May could have arguably done the same thing, and it would have been perfectly fine.
And once you reach a point in NXT, like you hit the nail on the head when you said, Callum, that like the women in NXT are the draw. Obafemi is fucking great. Trick Williams, very over, very fun. I'm a fan of Trick. I'm not going to downplay him. There are good talent in the men's division in NXT, and I'd be more interested in watching Ethan Page than some people on the main roster, or somebody like. We always talk about like the potential of Josh Briggs that never fucking manifests. But like, I would rather watch some of those men than some of the men on the main roster. But the women are like, not to crap on some of those names, but if you could cycle them in here and there more. And I think that the roster itself just, right now we're in a weird spot where they don't seemingly want to do the draft this year. And they're not advertising it. They're past the point that they would have done it already. I'm assuming we're not going to get a 2025 WWE draft, and they're just going to either maybe we never get another draft in the future. Maybe Triple H doesn't like it.
I think they're going to save it for the. This is stupid because they're not fucking sitcoms, but they're going to save it for the season premiere. I think they're go back.
That would be if they don't do it by the beginning of September. I don't think they're doing it at all. And then I think that's a decision from Triple H to go, I don't think we should do it this year. I think we should just like swap people here and there, like LA Knight's just on Raw, for the sake of it. But they should do a little bit more of an effort of just swapping in and out the talent, because at this point, you can't tell me Jada Parker is not ready for the main roster. And you can't tell me that Sol Ruka couldn't have a better mid-card feud with Julia than somebody like a BFAB. I'm not going to crap on BFAB specifically like that, but like Nikki Cross being on the main roster right now and just doing what she's doing in the Wyatt Six is not doing her any good, and it's not doing the company any good. She's being wasted. She could be a fun character in NXT right now, and she could be working with Thea Hale, and she could be working with somebody like an Izzy Dame or a Tatum Paxley, and just not having to do the same couple people. And then you take somebody like a Fallon Henley, who, like, Fallon is a good talent that's not going to do anything on this show. She's going to accompany JC Jane and maybe be in the Battle Royal. And that's a shame that she's not doing anything more than that. But you mean to tell me that in another world, Fallon Henley and JC Jane wouldn't be just as good of a representation of the NXT tag team? We don't know who's going to be the tag team for NXT, and we don't know the Raw one. But man, is it going to be disappointing if, like, Kelani Jordan is just in the Battle Royal, and then on Monday Night Raw they go, well, I guess let's put Natty and Maxine in the tag title match. It'll be like, oh, come on, man. Like, you know, Maxine's fun, sure, but she didn't need that spot. And Natty is a perennial veteran, but I don't think that she needed to be in that spot either. And let's put her in Battle Royal instead. Or, you know, I hope that Solruka and Zarya are the NXT women.
That's my guess, that Zaruka will be the team for NXT.
And I'm hoping that the Raw team is the Kabuki Warriors, so we get Asuka and Kairi in there. Me too. Like, that's the biggest set of names that you can do. And then, surprisingly, Raquel and Roxanne become the odd ones out as being like, well, I don't know if those two should have been in that spot. But, you know, they're the actual tag champs. But, like, if they would cycle through some of these women a little bit better and a little bit easier, I see nothing different between what Ariana Grace does in NXT, even though she's only popped up like 7 times in NXT this entire year for some reason, than what Alicia Fox was doing in WWE on the main roster. And for them to have to go over to TNA to do that, maybe it's because there's an abundance of talent. Maybe it's because there's a little bit more freedom to, like, play around a little bit and all, but, like, the talent is there. The women's division in WWE, if you count for Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, and you don't even look at Evolve, and you don't even look at LFG, and there are some good people there too. Fucking amazing, talented, well-rounded superstars. And they could easily book this as a 2-night show and have it not feel like you're doing the fantasy booking where we run into a situation where we're like, all right, well, what do I do with one Bushwhacker and Danny Davis? Okay, I guess I'm going to put them in something else. You have more than enough talent that you can do a 2-night show and have this kick ass. And that was part of what I was doing with the little fantasy booking that I was attempting to do. And I just, you know, I just wasn't feeling the fantasy booking element of it. But I was like, there's so many people in WWE right now, just in the women's division. I could have gotten the 3-night card out of it by booking actual feuds. I was looking at names, like I tried to, you know, book just Jordan Grace. And I was just like, let's just reset everything. Let's pretend like no champions are crowned. If you gave me this entire roster and I needed to book championship matches from, you know, ground zero or whatever, I was like, who would I like to see Jordan Grace against? Oh, Rhea and Bianca and potentially Jade and Asuka and Becky. And I was like, oh my God, already for Jordan Grace, I got like 9 options. You know? Oh, Tiffany, what she could be doing a feud with Chelsea. She could be doing this or that or that or that or that or that. Like, it's certainly not a matter of not having the talent available. And they do have enough time that they could put more of these women in a more prominent spot because Raw and SmackDown are so long. They just choose not to.
That's a great point you just made. Because why the fuck are the 2 main events for this show literally just, I don't know, I'll fight you! Yay! What the fuck are we doing here? Like,
Because you need
Please.
that 30 minutes for Seth Rollins to cut the same promo that he cuts every single week.
But you
Right.
fucking
So-
don't.
It's exhausting. Yesterday for Raw, and this week is great when it comes to they did record NXT ahead of time. They did record SmackDown. I'm so thankful I'm not going to have to pay as much attention to those shows. I started to do something at 7:50 yesterday, and Caroline, my wife, was like, "Oh, but Raw's about to start." Or no, not 7:50, at 5:50, because it was 6 o'clock. And she's like, "But Raw's about to start at 6 o'clock, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "But shouldn't you wait to do that a little bit later? And you don't have to like start cleaning up stuff in the kitchen and whatever right now." And I was like, "No, I'm good. I'll be good for another 40 minutes." And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I'm like, "Oh, remember, it's the beginning of the show. The show is going to start off with footage from Night of Champions, and then it's going to show you footage of people walking into the arena, and it's going to show you we're at the PPG Paints Arena, and then Corey Graves is going to say, it's Pittsburgh. I like Pittsburgh." And then they're going to have somebody come out, and for 3 minutes, they're going to make their entrance. If it's Jey Uso, it'll be 10 minutes because I'll run through the main event, his theme all over again. And then they'll cut a promo about what we just saw the footage of at Night of Champions. Somebody else will interrupt. They'll have a fight, and then I'll end up getting an announcement of some kind of a tag team match. I was like, yeah, I don't have to be within earshot of the TV until at least 6:15. It's like by the time I got done with whatever I was doing, I forget what I was doing at the time. I was like folding laundry or something or whatever. I got done everything that I needed to do, and I sat down right when they were switching over to like end that opening segment. And I was like, yeah, I didn't need to watch any of that. And if that would have been something to set up something with Evolution a little bit better. Now, granted, it was Rhea Ripley, so it was setting up Evolution, but what was the promo? Hey, I haven't done anything in a while. I think I'm going to go for that championship. Oh, conveniently, here's the champion to say, by the way, I get to choose who I pick for my opponent. Might as well just be you. Well, right then.
It was even less than that because it was just Ripley going, "Hey!" Immediately, Io comes out and just says, "I'm gonna fight you." Okay, yay! It's what are we doing? Like, and this is my argument. They tried to run this once with the men, and the pandemic saved them because it was Goldberg and Roman, where Roman just went, "Yeah, it's gonna be me. I'll fight you." It's completely unacceptable across the board. No one wants to see that for your main feud. I just want to see a better booked women's division, and I'm not sure if the show is actually going to be a push towards that, but I'd hope that it could be.
I mean, you can't say, well, we couldn't have built that Io and Rhea match better over the past couple of months because Io was so busy. You can't use that excuse.
Because she was literally just waiting on Rhea.
Like, if they actually really cared about the show, they would have prepared a little bit more for it. The fact of the matter is, this is getting a 2-week build because they had Night of Champions in between, and realistically, not much. The match that's getting the most booking going into this is the NXT one, is the NXT title match, because they decided to do like an actual qualifying thing to decide who the opponent was going to be, rather than Rhea coming out and saying, "I'll challenge you." Well, Rhea coming out and saying, "Yeah, we'll fight," and then Trish Stratus coming out on SmackDown and saying to Trish Stratus, "Yeah, we'll fight," and then and that being your booking to main title matches on the show.
It seems like it's even worse when it comes to SmackDown. If I read the reports correctly, it seems like Jade and Tiffany are in the ring. Tiffany says, "I know I'm going to fight you at SummerSlam, but first, here's my opponent for Evolution." And then Trish comes out, and it's like,
me. She announces it. Yeah, she announces her opponent like super. Like again,
well, it's kind of like it's the same thing as Io, but Trish isn't there, and she's kind of opening the door. Like, I want to fight Trish. I'm assuming she says, "Well, Nick Aldis also gave me the option of just fight whoever I want," and she's just more imaginative than Io is, and just like, "All right, cool. The top woman of all time." Oh, she accepts? Cool. Like,
cool. And she just happens to be backstage.
It's one of the worries that I have with like that I hope that this evolution doesn't fall in the pattern of, and I don't know if it necessarily will, but one of the biggest issues I had with the original evolution is that it felt like a WWE victory lap, where you have everyone just say like, look what we're doing for women. Like, we invented women's wrestling like 3 years ago, and now they've had their own pay-per-view. And it's and do their whole, like, I think they all grabbed hands at the end and were holding flowers and doing like a curtain call encore thing. It's like this is a wrestling show. Like, people are supposed to not like each other, and like this isn't like and that's like, I know some, like, they do these occasionally for wrestling. So I'm not saying they necessarily shouldn't have people like celebrate at the end and feel like really accomplished about it, but it's more of a case of it breaks the immersion quite a bit. Whereas if they just decide to use this as some sort of, again, the PR exercise, a victory lap, some just say like, hey, this is a big moment for our women's performers, rather than just saying like, yeah, well, why don't we actually build it to an actual show where people want to beat the shit out of each other in matches that people really want to watch? The only really match they did that for Evolution was Becky and Charlotte, because they were already having a really like hot feud at that point in time anyway. So they said like, okay, let's throw them into a last woman standing match. But then but yeah, I think that you've run a risk with a show like Evolution to just fall into treat it too much like a celebration rather than an actual well-booked promoted show.
Yeah, it's less of a pay-per-view and it's more of a parade. Exactly.
And you can have a balancing act. It can be a bit of a parade, but it should be first and foremost a well-booked pay-per-view, because that's the thing that actually gives a show like this longevity. Like, you do like big parades or celebration shows like once in a while, like if you have like, a special episode of Raw 3000 whatever or anything along those lines, you can make that a bit more pageantry and parade than actual show. You probably should try and balance all of these things out better. But if you lean too far one way and just hope that the like little PR boost you get from it carries you through, then like it just means that it's a show that kind of lives its own little bubble and doesn't really affect anything either before it or moving forward. So, as I feel like, and this one already smacks a little bit of that, because they haven't spent any real time building for any of the matches beyond the NXT one by having someone earn the right to challenge for the championship. And the rest of them, they're just saying, oh, it's a 2-week build, and it's also the two main title matches are between two people that kind of actually respect each other, don't actually dislike each other, or have any kind of heated rivalry in any way, shape, or form. They're just going to, go out and just have a nice, kind, respectful match. It's fine to do that for one of them. It's fine to have a babyface match for one of them, but probably you should make your other women's title match a bit more of a blood feud, rather than just like two matches where we'll shake hands at the start and we'll shake hands at the end, and one person will win, and then we'll, join hands and walk off into the sunset together. But that's like, it's a little bit lame for both matches to be like that.
I got 2 points that when you said this that I wrote down to be like, one's a question that I'm going to put out for you guys that I think we might have gotten into what our predictions, but I'll put it in here so cut down on the prediction time. The other one's a little diatribe. The question though, over under on Stephanie McMahon opens the pay-per-view and cuts the everybody we're here for Evolution, the celebratory thing.
Why do you think that she did that for fucking WrestleMania? Of course she's
gonna say, yep.
I think the more the over under is whether she is on commentary for one or more matches.
Ooh, that's a good. I'm gonna say 60.
That is a good one.
I'm gonna say we're setting the bar at 60%. Over under. I'm gonna say over 60.
So they're gonna feel like they're gonna need to put. I think they're gonna feel like they need to put a woman on commentary for at least one of the matches.
How great would it be if this is where they finally decide, you know what, Kathy, you've been training a little bit, right? You want to wrestle? You got to be.
You'll be in the battle royal.
Be in the battle royal. Like that would be fun as hell, though. Like I would rather have something like that as like a little neat thing than for them to, to not do something like that. The other thing I was going to bring up though, in response to what you were just talking about. This is something that I didn't realize until I brought up the Wikipedia thing. I have that sitting next to me right now. And when I just looked at this like a real quick scan, I was like, ooh, this is not something that they have in mind, I'm sure. And there's probably somebody that's going to listen to this and go, my God, you're one of those fucking people that tries to break down too many, like, there's layers here kind of a thing. This card, at a quick glance, feels very transparent to me and booked in the sense of this isn't being booked. Not a single match that's being booked here is being booked with story in mind. They are being booked 100% as you should approach this from the lens of a wrestling fan who understands pro wrestling from the IWC perspective. Io versus Rhea. The story here, technically speaking, in the kayfabe sense, is they've fought multiple times. That's it. It's just Rhea can't beat Io, and they are going to have another match because they are the top two women, so they just are fighting for the title. There isn't really any story there, but the real reason why this is on the card is if you are Triple H and you say to the three of us on this podcast, why do you think I put this on the card? We would respond, well, you know that Io and Rhea are going to have a really good match. And you know that this is a WrestleMania rematch in one way. And you know that you probably want to put the belt on Rhea afterward. And if you don't, that it's at least that Io beats Rhea and it's another thing to tell that story or whatever. But you primarily want the two biggest names on Raw to go up against each other because you think that the match is going to be good. And that's going to really give you some points from the in-ring people, right? And then Triple H would go, exactly. Now, why do you think that I'm booking Tiffany versus Trish? Well, you want to give Trish Stratus a really prominent spot on the card because she's a legend, and you think that having her against Tiffany Stratton makes sense because they are the two blondes, they're two hot blondes, so they got that thing. Tiffany looks up to Trish, and that gives her a fresh opponent and something else to do. Yes, that's the booker perspective. Why are you doing the Fatal 4-Way for the women's tag? Well, you know, you got to make sure that you get a bunch of people on the card. And you have this situation with Liv, so you're doing that. So that's why you're throwing Bliss and Charlotte in there. And why are you doing the Jordynne Grace match? Well, you want to have some kind of a title change, right? And you want to give her a prominent spot. That's not because JC and Jordynne is the story you want to tell. It's because you want Jordynne to win the championship. Why are you doing the Battle Royal? It's because you are putting lots of women on the card and you don't have any spot for them. But you want to make it seem like it's worthwhile, so you put that for a title shot. And you can't do it for SummerSlam, so you're doing it for Clash of Paris. All 5 matches so far, and even the match that they haven't announced yet with the triple threat of the Women's Intercontinental Championship, are all being put on there because it's very clear that there's a writer's goal in mind, more so than there's a story being told. And when they announce what Julia is doing, it's one of two options. We wanted to give Julia a spot on the show, and she's defending the United States Championship because we want to give her a win, or we didn't have a spot for her on the show because of all the other matches, so she's in the Battle Royal as a big deal. At that point, Stephanie Vaquer and Julia are probably the final two of the Battle Royal because you book it backwards. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's very clear. The same way as the Saturday night's main event is with Goldberg. Yeah, we got Goldberg. We don't need the rest of the show. We put some big names on there. It's good. That's a little disappointing because they could have been telling stories and they could have been building this as a pay-per-view. But if you were to take a fan who is like tapped into it like we are, and then you take a casual who has no idea what the stories are, and they said to me, or you, or you know, anybody that's listening to this, I'm sure. So what's the story here? You would break down the Evolution card by talking about writer's terms and booker terms and, you know, well, Jordynne Grace is somebody from another company and she's whatever. You wouldn't be saying Seth Rollins won this thing called Money in the Bank, and he did so by having his buddies interfere, and the guy that he screwed over is the guy that's now coming after him in LA Knight.
Well, yeah, but I like look, even if you want to run it as a parade, like I said earlier, there's a fucking way to do that. There's a way to run it as a parade. This isn't the show that you book in Booker's terms and go, hey, shut up. Because this is the show that a bunch of people who don't give a fuck about the IWC and Booker terms are going to watch. Because they just want to watch the women wrestle. This is the show that you go, oh, we put Rhea against Nikki Bella because that one chick's all over TikTok and the other one's Nikki Bella. Most people know her, or like, this is the show that you can easily book for casuals or like tell a story about, like I said, like a Roxanne, or my God, this is where you could have debuted Mariah May. Talk about how Evolution was her dream because, she's so inspired by the WWE women and WWE is so cool to her. This would have been the spot for her. And it just feels like, shut up, it's Evolution. We're running back Rhea and EO, which is basically the only thing we've done with that belt this year. Tiffany and Trish is cool because it's generational, but you don't really think Trish is going to fight Jade Cargill, do you?
Right. That too. Like, again, it's like, all right, well, we know that Tiffany's going to beat her and, whatever. But then Trish gets to hold up Tiffany's hand and...
Fuck it. Let Trish win and let Naomi cash in on her. I know it's the second time that weekend I'm predicting cash in on a legend, but, who cares? Like, it'd be a fun moment.
You're still thinking Seth is cashing in on Goldberg?
Because what's the alternative is Goldberg gets his ass beat. I don't see that happening. Yeah, I just think, like, have fun with it. These shows are supposed to be fun. Wrestling is supposed to be fun. It's becoming way too meta. I think I texted you this. Was it last night? Where I was just like, the stories in WWE suck because it's all just, hey, it's meta and you know why this is happening, and just understand it from a meta perspective. Not everyone understands wrestling that deeply. You know what I mean?
Or wants to.
And this isn't the company that needs to be pandering to those people because those people hate this company.
I think you'll find there's a lot of smart people that are just pure WWE fans. I think, like, actually considering how small the wrestling audience overall is getting, I think probably we're getting into, maybe not right now, but we're closing in on a period where the majority of fans are going to be the smarky ones that follow it on the internet and all this other stuff, and the minority will be the casuals that dip in and out of this stuff. Maybe they're just preparing for that by making everything like, oh, like, we know you've been watching pretty much non-stop for the last 10 years, so you know exactly what's going on here. So,
I mean, to do like another equivalency of it, again, to tie into like more of a Fanboys Anonymous perspective, if people are like tapped into these different series and stuff, once you reach a certain point in a series for like movies and TV shows, whatever, and you start doing the winks and the nods, sometimes there are properties that they fall apart if you don't approach it from the perspective of knowing that stuff. I don't think you can take somebody that is, thrown right into the mix and have them watch Deadpool and Wolverine and have them understand what the hell this is about. Because that movie, spoiler alert for a movie that's been out for a year at this point or whatever, that movie hinges on you might not get the joke unless you know about a production of a movie that was in development hell for a couple of years and was never created. Because otherwise you're going to go, is that Channing Tatum? Why is he Gambit? Yeah. And then you get somebody like me that goes and pushes their glasses up. Well, actually, he was scheduled to be a part of it. It's like, it's the same thing of the pro wrestling side of things. If I were to take a great example is one time when Caroline's cousin and her husband were visiting and staying with us. And, they're staying for a couple days and stuff. So by that time, I'm watching wrestling at least, once or twice or, here and there. And they're sitting around, they're tired of walking around in New York. So it's like, let's just sit around, let's just chat while Tony's working. And they're like, so who is this guy and why is he doing what he's doing? And it's Otis. He's doing the worm. And I'm like, it's going to take a lot to explain, but there's this other guy in the past and he used to do the thing and it was like, the worm and whatever. This guy's doing a variation of it. It's Caterpillar or whatever. It's supposed to be kind of funny just because he's fat, wrestling stupid, etc., etc. His name's Otis. It's not his real name, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm explaining it. And then they're like, oh, okay, now I get it. And, when you're watching a show like this Evolution show, if you were to just say to somebody, it's all the women that are on there, and then they go, well, then explain it some more. You have to start getting into those like writer's terms and the smarky elements of it because you're not going to appreciate it as much. Nobody who's a casual is going to appreciate this show as much as the people that are on Twitter and everything that are exactly the type of people that will also criticize the hell out of it.
See, but I also think that properties can insanely fall apart if you start
totally
going too deeply into like, well, everyone understands this, so let's just rip the core elements of what this is supposed to be apart from the seams. Like, people now think Batman is just a spoiled little rich bitch. It's because that whole dynamic has just changed over the years because people have told these two meta stories where we're just making fun of Batman because he can't get over the death of his parents because we've seen it too much instead of what that's supposed to be. And it's the same thing I feel with wrestling where it's getting too much like, I can't just go, oh, guy won the Royal Rumble, he's the best on the roster right now. It's, yeah, this guy's getting pushed super heavy and like people don't like that. And like they tried to make Cena a bad guy, but now people are cheating. Like, you don't always want to have to explain it like that. And I think for Evolution, that should be even more so. Like, make this a show that anyone can just be like, let's say you're dating someone and this is her first time watching wrestling. Like, come watch the show. It's a woman's show, and like it's just gonna be, look at these cool women's wrestlers, and you can explain it in like one or two sentences without getting too bogged down into the nerdiness of wrestling.
Oddly enough, one of the only ones that you could get into and explain as far as like a story would be Raquel and Roxanne. And to be like, so the story here is Roxanne is a girl that was like, she's on the younger side or whatever. She just joined this roster and she's fallen into the group of a bunch of bullies and replacing the top bully who is injured right now. Her friend is a little wary about that, whatever. It's one of the few times you could actually tell a little bit of a story. Otherwise, then you're going, what's the story between JC Jane and Jordan Grace? And you're like, JC, she's champ. She will lose.
Well, again, I don't want to play like this company that's like that I hate with all my soul, but it's like a case of it's an easy story to tell. The story is JC Jane is the champion. Jordan Grace won a tournament to earn the right to challenge her for the title. That's that's all I need for most matches on a show. Is like, oh, it's a championship match where one person's earned the right to face the title, and all the other ones you can. There is a similar story, like Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. Yes, it should have been built to way more effectively than it has been to actually add some spice to it. But the story is that Rhea has never beaten Io Sky 1-on-1, and Io's giving her like an opportunity to fight for the title again, kind of maybe with the idea of, oh, I'm confident I can win because you've never beaten me before. Same thing you could say with Tiffany and Trish Stratus. The story should be along the lines of Trish helped Tiffany back earlier this year in like her matches with Nia Jackson, Candice LeRae. So it's a case of, okay, now I'm kind of repaying that favor by giving Trish a title opportunity at Evolution.
Yeah, but you see, you just said more words than they're going to on TV.
Yeah, no. Well, that's the idea. Like, as long as they do that, but this is actually a show that is more built for casual fans, because realistically, the idea is you kind of like say like, oh, why are these two fighting? My response would be like, well, I wouldn't say this guy like this. I mean, if it was like like a girl that I was like seeing in this their first wrestling match, I wouldn't say it in these sort of terms. But the basic gist would be shut the fuck up and watch it. And that's kind of
That's going to be a good second date.
yeah, exactly. But that's the gist, because most of these matches are made just because they just want to put a load of good women's wrestling matches on. And that's as casual as you get, because there is no story. It's just, or there's very little story. The whole thing is just watch it because the match will be good. And that's, oddly enough, I think that's the thing that is often pointed towards AEW, but like it seems to have been creeping more and more into like WWE's like pay-per-view vernacular of like, oh, we just put this match together because it's really good, or it'll be a good match.
That's taking over their TV shows too. Not going to get too into it here, but Sheamus and Rusev, I was like, yeah, this feels like a match that should be on a Dynamite, and people would actually be into it because it's just a good match. The fans on Raw were like kind of sitting on their hands for most of it.
Yeah, well, hang on. So, like, yeah, it's like, oh wait, the entrances have just happened. Now we're just waiting for the finish, which is typical WWE fan response to a lot of wrestling nowadays. But as I say, I feel like Evolution itself is kind of built for the way that's currently framed. It's built for casuals, and it seems like it's this big kind of celebration. I would ideally want a world where they have put more effort into building particular matches. I mean, that fucking like women's four-way match for the tag titles, when that eventually happened, it's like, okay, they have been building up the Charlotte and Alexa team up. Obviously, it was meant to be Raquel and Liv, but Roxanne had to come in because Liv's injured. Like, NXT don't have any real women's tag teams unless they're going to throw in, I guess it's like Zarya and Sika will probably be the women's team from their side of things.
I mean, the only real alternative that they have, they don't go with Zeruka, which it should 100% be Zeruka. Yeah. Like, it, just for in-ring and like star power and all. But it would end up being, I guess, Izzy, Dame, and Tatum Paxley, which
or Jasmine Nix and Fallon Henley.
Right? Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, but then it's like, and then there's the other one from Raw will probably be. Who would be the other one from Raw? I have no idea.
It's got to be either Kabuki Warriors or Natty and Maxine, because everybody else is either injured or they don't have a partner.
Yeah. Natty and Maxine would be very disappointing. Natty,
you should be the Kabuki Warriors, yeah.
Natty should be on the show, by the way. She's doing this thing outside the company, which is a stupid
NWA.
thing. Not only the NWA, she's doing it with Bloodsport and Booker T promotion, where she's like, yeah, I'm a fucking badass. And people are like, yeah, I want to wrestle you. Put that on your own television. The fuck? Like, I don't understand why you would allow someone to do that elsewhere when you could be doing that in-house and make your shows mean more.
That's another point of talking just women's division in general. Natalia's been there longer than anybody. And she is so... it was a nice way of putting this. It's like Stockholm syndrome, almost, it seems, where like they do not want to push her. They do not want to prioritize her. It's very clear. It's very obvious. And I don't blame them for not making her the most important person on the roster. Like, there are people that are more
a bit.
Yeah, like, and there are people that are more popular, and there are people that are moving more merchandise, and people that are younger, and like all these other elements like that. Everybody reveres Natty to a certain extent, goes like, all right, legend, future Hall of Famer, et cetera, et cetera. But the way that she's been booked lately has been, well, we know that you have value. We just don't want to use you. You can go and do whatever you want to keep yourself busy and happy and whatever. And you can have your big run, but it can't be on our show. We got other shit we got to do. And it's like that. I feel so bad about her, but she's having fun, it seems. And, she's just like, yeah, things are like better than they've ever been. And I'm like, don't you want that title?
Yeah, okay. Real fast rant. That's becoming a huge problem in the meta era, where people are just like, No, man, the titles don't really mean anything. It's all about being a team player in the face of the company. I hate that. You should, even if you're fucking in character, you should want to be champion. And not enough people want that. And I'll stop there because I could go for 2 years.
It's another talking point too of just who do we think is going to be out of this list of people that we have on the roster right now, we have available to us, and one way or another, Raw, SmackDown, etc. Who in 5 years, 10 years do we think is going to end up being a bigger deal? The way that Io Shirai was losing the Mae Young Classic and now she's defending the championship, or Liv Morgan was part of the Riot Squad and a 6-woman tag primarily to get Sasha, Bailey, and Natty their own separate thing, not to highlight the Riot Squad. And then Liv Morgan is, if she wouldn't have been injured, she would have been only in a tag team spot because there are still other names and she had already had like a year-long reign on top. Who you guys think could be, well, in 5 years, we're talking about Evolution 3, and it turns out that Lash Legend is like the major star that's the company's building around or something.
I would say Roxanne Perez would probably be at or near the top, maybe in a role like Bailey's in right now, where she's the vet in the mid card. Callie Armstrong, by all accounts, people see future main eventer in her, and I think she's pretty good. And then I would have to wait and talk about like future signings, because you also have to think, is Becky Lynch going to be around in 5 years? Is Charlotte Flair going to be around in 5 years if they do this again? You know? Will they have completely moved on?
I think the surest I think is it's Rhea Ripley still on top. Like, she's only 28. She's got a long career in front of her. I don't see her moving anywhere outside of WWE. So she's probably the surest bet that you have as being top star. Tiffany's still going to be high up there. I think in terms of people that aren't currently positioned towards the top that will be really high up there, I'd say you're probably looking at, I'd say Stephanie McCare is probably the safest bet out of any of them. Maybe Julia. But there's always the thing that Julia's going to be always positioned on maybe like the tier below, the same sort of level. Io Sky and Asuka. It's like, okay, you'll get your occasional world title run, but you're kind of there as more of a bridge between the mid card and the main event. Honestly, I don't have like, it's difficult to say. It's always like hard to predict with a lot of stuff. Like, you'd think that someone like Blake Monroe will be a surefire hit. I don't have the strongest amount of faith just yet that she's going to be a long-term top-level person for WWE.
Same here.
Really?
I think there's a good shot. I just think it almost feels like, I don't know, maybe you should. It's one of those things where you shouldn't show your hand too evidently, because if you become too demonstrate that you're just happy to be in WWE, then there's less incentive to actually push that person, because it shows like loyalty and dedication to it, but it also means that they're not going to kick up a fuss if you decide to push them down the order every now and again.
You know what, though? That brings up another point. Evolution 1 occurred 3 weeks, maybe less than, after the original All In. And at the time, the idea of an AEW seemed, like a pipe dream that there would even be another company. You just asked who's going to be here the next time they do this. I would have never thought that Sasha Banks would leave. You know? And you really don't know what the wrestling world has in store. So there's always the chance that maybe in 7 years Sasha Banks is back. Maybe in 7 years, AEW has its own annual women's event. Who knows? But I think that's an interesting element too. That like Toni Storm was on the first Evolution, and now she's being put up against Mercedes Moné in what's being called the biggest women's wrestling match in AEW history.
I mean, you look back at the old Evolution, and like there's three names that stand out in terms of that have gone on beyond WWE, and part of the AEW is Toni Storm, Mercedes, and Athena. They're essentially the three names that were previously part of WWE. They're now like linchpins of AEW structure or Ring of Honor in more of case in Athena's case. But they're three people that are going to be prominently featured at All In, both within the obviously two of them in the women's world title match, the other one part of the casino gauntlet match, alongside the fact that like she'll be probably main eventing the Ring of Honor show the day beforehand here, or on Friday. I can't remember if it's on Friday or Saturday, but either way,
I think it's Friday.
It's Friday.
Yeah, probably Friday.
All ends on Saturday.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So on the Friday. Yeah. So yeah, it means that there's obviously it's now a different landscape in that back then it was pretty much a you had your sporadic women's centric promotions like you had Stardom over in Japan and things on those lines, and then you had Shimmer and Shine and like
Shimmer and Shine and Glow and all of it sparkles.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
like women of wrestling and all this other stuff as well. So you had those promotions, but now you have a definitive number two that also has a they have their challenges in terms of spotlighting the women. I don't think that they're in any way in as bad a position as they were 3 or 4 years ago when it really felt like the women were there almost as a gimmick, as opposed to now where they do feel like prominent parts of the card. There's still obviously work that needs to be done, definitely, but I'd say AEW does a better job of not let's say necessarily absolute top level job, but a lot of their women's feuds are centered on just in ring matches and like rivalries that way. There's less like focus on like character or story beyond that point, but you do see more women fighting each other just without having to have a championship at stake. Like right now you've got feud between Tay J and Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford, or you've got Thunder Rosa and Athena going for the ROH women's title. You've got like Tekla making her way through the women's division, seemingly getting caught up with like Aminata while they're still sorting out stuff with like Jamie Hayter to come back. So there are bits and pieces that are going on. As I say, there's always room for improvement with every single promotion that comes across this line of things. But I'd say AEW's looking pretty solid right now in the women's division. They've got like a good order of people underneath, like Willow and Chris and a lot of other people that are ready to burst into the main event scene. Probably their biggest issue over the last couple of years, beyond anything else, is again this kind of glass ceiling thing that we were speaking about earlier with WWE, where it has felt like everything's gravitates around Tony and now Mercedes, which means that it's hard for other people to push themselves into the main event level. But maybe it's just like a byproduct of nowadays. There are just like people just have super long title reigns. Usually in the world champions, like it's very rare you see a world champion have a reign that's only like a month or two long. It will usually be much longer than that. So it means that it does feel like there's less movement at the top of the card because the champions stick around longer than they used to. But it means that you need to just be shuffling things around a little bit more and just making sure that, as we spoke about earlier, both with AEW and WWE, you need to be building people up to have feuds and stories where it doesn't need to involve a championship but still be treated like a big deal. Like there's no reason why there shouldn't be a women's storyline in WWE in the same vein of like a Drew McIntyre and CM Punk feud that they had last year, or the same level of like AEW, like the equivalent would be I know like CM Punk MJF or when Hangman and Moxley were just feuding for the sake of feuding and along those lines. Like, there's no reason why there shouldn't be more stuff like that. You saw it last year with like AW, with Willow and Chris. That was Chris Down Under. That was a whole feud, no championship involved at all, and that felt like a really, really big deal. The same thing they're doing kind of now with like Nightingale and Marina Shafir, and where Statlander fits into that as well. I mean, they have done it with like in WWE as well. Just it needs to become a consistent, regular thing rather than, oh wow, they're doing this and this is different and interesting. It's like, well, it should feel different, interesting, and fun, but it should be a case of, oh, but they always do these things. Like it's not good because it's rarely seen. It's good because it's good. Or it's like it's a well told story, or anything of that ilk.
Most of the discussion revolves around the idea, it's been 7 years or whatever. Can you please start just booking the women better? It's like, that's the big lesson, is just, man, it's been almost a decade and you haven't learned that lesson yet.
Well, I would say like the lesson is like, well, the overall lesson is that you should be booking the women better, definitely, on both sides of the company. But it's a case of, I think AEW, again, I know I'm a fanboy for it, so maybe I'm just speaking out that side of my face, really. But it's more of a case of, I feel like AEW treat the women at a similar level to the men in terms of, we're just going to book you the same way that we book the men. In terms of, and I say, if you like AEW style things, but a lot of it is based around the fact of, we're just putting you in matches against each other in different configurations, and you have feuds based around that. Whereas WWE's always taken a bit more of a promo inbuilt or more character and story driven aspect. So maybe it's a lot more smoother for AEW to make that transition. But it just doesn't feel like in WWE they've quite nailed the. They've got people at the top order that are doing stuff well, but they haven't quite nailed the telling stories underneath the championships.
Yeah.
Or putting things together that way. As soon as they start doing that, it'd be better, realistically. But the idea is that you should be booking the women better. But there's also issues the men's side of things as well. So maybe they should just be, just book better. It's probably the lesson for all companies. All companies should just be booking better than they currently are. But that's as I say, we'll see that thing hopefully transition over time. That should be the biggest thing they should be concentrating on, is making the women feel like they can tell these stories without having to necessarily have a championship involved for it to be worthwhile.
Now, I do have one more topic that I wanted to bring up that we could technically have gotten into on the predictions, but I think that on the predictions, we're going to be talking more about just like who's going to win and where it's going to lead and all that. We don't know who is going to be for sure wrestling in the Fatal 4-Way. We don't know what other matches they're going to add. I'm assuming that they might add a Julia match, and that they will probably add the women's triple threat for the Intercontinental Championship, and probably nothing else onto this card because they're already at their capacity. But generally speaking, with the unknowns in mind, who do you think would be the legends that you would want to return that would be worthwhile for the Battle Royal? Or if so-and-so wasn't on this card, you would be like, wow, I'm surprised that Trish wasn't here. We know that Trish is going to be there, but I guess Lita would be probably the next example for that. Are there certain people that you guys are like, I hope so-and-so returns because it would be weird without them?
I know Rob's answer, so you might as well say it.
Do you? Because I don't.
You want Brie Bella to come back as well with Nikki.
Oh, well, I see, now that it's a Battle Royal, I don't think we need that, because I think Nikki can just win a Battle Royal on her own.
I wonder if she's not even going to compete.
See, that would be weird.
I think that I was going to say there's a chance that she could host the show, or she could do commentary, or she could do something like that and not actually be in the ring.
On the poster, though. She's wrestling. She's also heavily advertised for SummerSlam, so that's another possibility.
I mean,
Outside of, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the way you spoke earlier about like the people that could potentially miss out on this card, because realistically, I mean, they might go with the 8 matches, but WWE in recent years have been very kind of slim in terms of their pay-per-view cards. There's no real reason to suggest that this one wouldn't follow the same suit of having like 5-6 matches at most. So then if you got like let's say the Evolution ends up being the current match they've got listed 5, and then a United States title match and the women and the Intercontinental title match. So let's round it up to 7 matches.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, you're probably going to have, we know that'll take Becky, Bailey, and Lyra out of the potential for a battle royal. We know there's going to be 2 other teams that will be taken out for that. So there's 4 other women, and then you've got
so
probably
realistically, probably Kabuki Warriors and probably Zaruka.
Yeah, and then you realistically probably Julia, and the likelihood with the minimum amount of time they have for it, it's probably just going to be Julia against Zelina Vega in a rematch. That seems like the most likely outcome for that. Or throwing Michin, because Michin seems to just be the perennial challenger for the Women's United States Championship. Either way, that's just one extra person, unless you decide to do some sort of like fatal 4-way, maybe with Zelina and Chelsea. But regardless, there's still going to be a lot of people that would otherwise not be on the card. So you've got to put those people in the Battle Royal.
Right. Jade's got to be in there. Naya's got to be on there. Naomi has to be on there.
Jade,
Maxine and Ivy. We know Ivy is like in the mix already because she's already said like I want to be in that battle royal. Stephanie is the only one that's confirmed.
Yeah, I'd say Jade's not going to be in the battle royal because I think Jade's just going to be watching the Tiffany Stratton Trish Stratus match, not going to be wrestling. But other than that, you want to make sure all those. So I don't think there's really that much capacity for any legend to be in because unless you make it a 50-woman battle royal, which seems a bit excessive. Like you need to put a lot of the women either from NXT or from like whether you want to feature any women from NXT beyond the NXT Women's Title match. But like if you want to do that, then you've still got like a decent number of women on the main roster that you need to incorporate in there, and none of them will like imagine the backlash that some of them would feel if they're left out the women's only show. Like you need to have all of them on the card.
Yeah, it's one thing if Scarlett is not wrestling, since she's just mostly a manager, and if they don't give her a spot in the Battle Royal.
If you kick off like a B-Fab or a Maxine Dupree or someone like that, or Natalia even, or anything along those lines.
Candice LeRae.
Yeah, exactly. You're like saying, okay, they really devalue the kind of, even on the show where literally no man can compete on this show, and they still won't book you on it. So like that'd be a real kick in the teeth for some of them. So they all need to be in the Battle Royal, whoever's not competing in any of the other matches. And yeah, it's whether you want to incorporate some people in NXT. So I think like it's not going to be the same as in the Evolution one where you had your Molly Hollies, Kelly Kellys, Tori Wilson, Alundra Blaze, Maria Kanellis type people in it to fill out a more of a legend quota. You might get one just for a fun spot. I don't know who that would necessarily be. Like who, to be honest, like there's not anyone that really stands out to me as like a returning legend that I'd be that interested in seeing in a battle royal. Like Lita doesn't really interest me that much. Definitely not a Kelly Kelly or like Molly Holly might be fun, but like
realistically, what is she going to do? She's going to, like, you throw in a Melina in there and everybody goes, oh, look at that. But they're not even going to get their own entrances.
Yeah. The one that might potentially interest me is Gail Kim.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Just the idea of her being there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the rumors about her coming in some sort of production cast.
Right. I think
she could just go and eliminate herself under the ring. That'd be fun.
I think this is more of a case where they have so many people on this roster and they are still going to be cutting a lot because you can't put everybody that's in NXT. And yeah, you should maybe put 1 or 2 people from Evolve or LFG if you want to spotlight them. Like, it'll be really ridiculous, I think, if they don't at all show Callie Armstrong, the Evolve Women's Champion. If they don't show her even on the show, I'm going to be surprised.
I think she'll be in the crowd.
I think a lot of people are going to be in the crowd, actually.
Yeah.
I think it'll be like, because they've been doing that a lot lately. They really like showing celebrities in the crowd. And then if they don't have celebrities, they like doing the, hey, Tiffany Stratton's here for Worlds Collide. And you're like, sure. Okay. You know?
Well, there's a question
Uh,
actually for it as well. Is like, do you think that either the Battle Royal or some element of the show will have some representation from either TNA or AAA?
I think that if they really have somebody from more so TNA, I think, than AAA. I don't think AAA's got anybody that they would like prioritize, but if they have somebody that they're really interested in from TNA, they might put one name on there. Like maybe Masha Slamovich is on there to be like, she's the champion that's there, and she is somebody that we justifiably could put out there and say, hey, look at that. She could win and she could get that shot at Clash in Paris. And then, of course, she won't. But I don't think that there's going to be more than one name from TNA, if there even is one. And I think it's probably going to be her.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, we'll know a bit more by the time we do like predictions next week for that show. But I guess maybe the overall thing, if we're bringing things to a bit more of a wrap up, is like, what's kind of the two final questions I'd probably pose to you guys then. It's like, first of all, what's your kind of overarching sentiment on the state of, I know we've like danced around it, but what's the overall sentiment on the state of women's wrestling in North America, let's say, in 2025?
Lots of potential. And if, in my personal opinion, a fair bit of overhype, but I think better booking can balance all of it out.
I think it's indicative of a lot of things in the world in general right now. There's all the potential in the world, there's all the time, there's all the tools, but you have two people on two extremes that are ruining it for everybody. Where you've got the, why isn't Lainey Reed, I've seen her for 3 seconds and I'm immediately going to stan her, and why isn't she fighting for the championship in the main event of this? And you're like, wow, relax, hold your horses. And then you get the other people that are like, why am I watching a women's show? I think that this should be a gimmick the same way that the minis were. And you're like, well, Jesus Christ, now you're on the flip side of that. And it's a matter of trying to figure out the logical center that nobody wants to buck on. And the logical center to me is just making things more equal. And that goes back to the just book them like the men's division, and then it'll all sort itself out. But I think generally speaking, it's got all the potential there. There's more women that are better in the ring now than there was last time. They just have to be willing to actually do it. Like the bookers and stuff.
Yeah. As like, from my perspective, I think we have, for punning intended, we have evolved beyond the original Evolution. I think NXT is the perfect blueprint for what you can do if you position your women's division as stars and give them like the time and character and basically build a lot of the show around it. I think that is the blueprint, and I don't see why that model can't be. I'm not saying like it has to be absolutely like copied, but it can't be, elements of it can't be taken on the main roster for WWE in AEW and other places as well. Like TNA, it's another good example. Like they, in long periods of time, the women's division is the kind of the centerpiece of the promotion. And I say it has to. There always has to be some ebb and flow about it. It's not always going to be the case, but sometimes the men's division is just going to overawe the women's side of things, whether it's through talent, whether it's through match quality, or anything along those lines. But, or whether the biggest star is either male or female at any point in time. But we need to get into a mindset, and it needs to be more firmly established over time that the top women's star can be the ultimate main eventer of your shows and be the biggest draw in your company, and not have that feel like a weird or like different thing, and feels like, okay, that's just the way that it is, and we should pivot towards that. So that's kind of my overall perspective. And then kind of my final kind of either question or fault, just to round it off on a bit more of a positive note, because we kind of bounce between some positive, negatives, some areas for improvement. Who would you say, it doesn't have to be like a single person, but who would you say have been your MVPs for women's wrestling so far this year? Or maybe even like
Well,
in the recent years or anything along those lines.
I think Mercedes finally got back to being the person that I saw her being, and I feel like she's really become a pillar in women's wrestling. So that's been fun for me and validating in some ways. I think Jordan Grace broke out and became a major star. I think you can't talk about women's wrestling without talking about Rhea and Bianca. We've said that a lot. By the way, that's a good pick for. I'd be damn surprised if she's not on this show. Is Bianca Belair, hurt or not? She should probably be here. Um, and for the future, I would say same thing I said since I started watching her. I love watching Sol Ruka do her thing. I think over in AEW, Athena needs to just be on the main program. I want to be talking about women's world champion Willow Nightingale. There's a lot, which is why I'm surprised that I'm a bit more negative on the overall state as I am, because I do have a lot of women's wrestling favorites.
I think if I were going to show somebody a shortened timeline of the past couple of years, or even just past like year and a half, and be like, who's the MVP in that kind of range, I think I'd probably still just default to Rhea and Bianca and just be like, they're great in the ring, they're good on the mic, character wise, visuals, they represent something that, like, I've said a million times on this podcast and elsewhere, that like, I'm not a celebrity type person. I don't feel ever that need of like, I see myself in anything, and I never like hero worship anybody or whatever. So like, that's lost on me, and I know that that's a little bit strange. Like, I'm the oddball out. Most people have a favorite actor. I've never had a favorite actor, and I think that that's a little bit strange, but whatever. And like, to a certain amount of people, Bianca and Rhea totally speak to them. And that connection is part of pro wrestling that I think is undervalued a lot. So those two, I think, just like, they check every box you could ask for.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely like probably especially from WWE terms, like the two biggest stars of the last few years, and so they would definitely be considered like MVPs.
They're Hogan Savage.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking like almost from like evolution, the previous evolution to now, I think the one for me from that period to this period, the one that's been like stood like head and shoulders above everyone else is Becky, just for that period of time, because I think that the level that she reached is still kind of yet to be met by Rhea and Bianca. I think they're definitely close to it, and you could argue Rhea is maybe at that level now. But I think there was just something, there was a lightning in the bottle element to Becky that hasn't been quite matched by anybody yet. And I think Rhea's definitely the closest that have done it in WWE, and so she's definitely like their MVP right now. And I think the closest that anyone's come to it outside of that is Toni Storm. I don't think that it can be kind of understated how pivotal she is in like AEW Women's Division's own development and their own growth, from being very much like lambasted several years ago to now being, it's still an area that someone will target and say it still needs to improve. There still needs to be more matches and more time dedicated to the women's division. But like, she feels like a force of nature at the top of that card. And so I'd say right now, especially for 2025, I'd say between like her and Mercedes on the AEW side, and then I'd say probably, if you're just talking about 2025, I'd say Io is probably the MVP for WWE. Even though she's not wrestling as much as she should be doing, I think that most of the great matches have revolved around her and her inclusion. So So yeah, that would be where I am right now. And so it's saying that if I was to vote on my Woman of the Year so far for 2025, it would probably be EO for WWE, and then probably Tony for AEW.
So we obviously do still have more things we need to be talking about on this pay-per-view discussion when we get into the pay-per-view predictions, because we will be giving our actual predictions for these matches, and we'll know more information about who is in the Fatal 4-Way for the tag titles, if they do announce anything for other matches. I'm kind of assuming at this point that SmackDown, we didn't get some announcements, but they could do some backstage filler segments and stuff. And they could just as easily as well do some kind of like, insert stuff on social media, because they do that kind of garbage. But probably by Raw, we'll know the full card outside of just the question marks of who else is in the Battle Royal. Maybe they'll even do one of those graphics where they show like everybody that's listed on there. And somebody like myself has to like pause the screen and go, okay, who's missing? They don't have Nikki Cross on there or something. But we will break down our predictions for who we think is going to win the matches and stuff next week. And we will update some other things along the lines when it comes to that on the hot tags coming up later on this week. But rolling into other types of discussions and stuff, next week we also have so many other pay-per-view things as well. So I don't know exactly when we're going to be recording the Evolution predictions, but it'll be sometime Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, most likely. And stay tuned for that. Make sure you show your support on all different sides of things that we have out there, including the link tree that I have up on the screen right now. Go to amangotree.com. You'll find all my different accounts over there. So if you are on any of those accounts and you want to follow me, you hit the follow or the like or the subscribe or whatever it might be on those platforms. I'm at Tony Mango for a good portion of those, although I've been trying to wean myself off of that over the years, because this was created during an internet era where people had those kind of names, and I wish I would have just put Anthony Mango or Tony Mango for stuff instead of the Tony thing. But that'll work itself out, or it won't, whatever it is. But follow me on those different platforms. Follow Rob and Callum too.
Yep, follow me everywhere at Dude Felice. I also sometimes wish I would just put my name. Check out my work on Fightful.com and check out what Callum's got going on.
You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Wigmeister14. I don't care that that's my username. I don't really care about being a real person, so it's kind of the more distant I can get from that in any kind of aspect, the best thing for me. So you can just call me that. You don't have to call me Callum. It's fine. And then you can check out the power rankings over on smarkatmoments.com, where I rank the WWE superstars based on their previous week's performances. And then while you're over there, you can check out the Fantasy League, also at www.fantasyleague.com, where we've just had the points tallied up from Night of Champions. We've had like a little bit of a trade as well, where picked up
Talatonga.
Yeah, it's picked up.
So I'm fucking back to that again.
Is it officially called Talatonga now? Did they say that on SmackDown?
Yes,
well, what's weird?
L.
Yeah, it's weird. They put it on the little lower third that it's Talatonga with one L, okay, which means that they trademarked a name last year with two L's and they didn't trademark with one L. So I don't know if that was just a typo or whatever.
Hey, but maybe that's why it took them a year to get him on TV.
That one L, they were like, we can't do that. We gotta. He's Cesar Sikoa.
Well, either way, so Talatonga's joined Tony's team in place with I think you cut out Drew
McIntyre, who returned fucking now after I did that.
So yeah, jerk. After losing points pretty much the entirety since a couple of weeks after WrestleMania. So who knows? Maybe one of me or Rob will pick up Drew McIntyre for next week or anything like that. Find out what the freshest versions of the teams and what our point standings are over at www.fantasyleague.com. Check out the spreadsheets there.
Okie dokie, everybody. You know the deal. Hit the like button, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and pass on those little thanks button donations if you are part of that. And leave your comments below. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you in advance for checking out the hot tags and maybe even the Darkcast. I'm probably going to try to get around to recording that maybe sometime tomorrow or so. We'll see about that though, but that'll be more of that Marvel DC type of stuff, and me explaining how that whole thing didn't work out as I had explained I was going to try to do. But anyway, we'll see you when we see you, whatever it might be. And adios for now. This has been another Smark Out moment, and we are being counted out.